So you are going to be hearing a lot from the brand over the next couple of months, just regarding feminine health and feminine health education. And before we get into all that content, I wanted to share a little bit more about why feminine health is so important to me and so near and dear to my heart. I think it was a topic that I was always curious about growing up. And I think part of that was because, it was so taboo in my household. I grew up in a really strict Egyptian Muslim American home, and the topic of body and sex and intimacy, it just was completely taboo. Even growing up, the topic of dating or, relationships was completely off limits, and it always made me really curious and really excited to learn more about my body and the way that my body worked. I also was a really late bloomer, so I didn't get my first period until I was about 15 years old. And I think that's what really heightened my curiosity. A lot of my girlfriends had been getting their periods for years, and I was just sitting there waiting for things to happen to me. So I think it just heightened my curiosity and made me want to learn more. When I finally moved out of my parents' home, I was away at school, and I think it was my first opportunity that I really got to explore and learn more about my body. And that was my first big push to go visit the gynecologist for the first time. Most of you guys know, it was during that first gynecological exam that I was diagnosed with cervical cancer. And I think that this was the moment that, feminine health and feminine wellness was no longer just like a curiosity, something that I wanted to learn more about. It's something I had to learn more about because it was my health and my life. And so it became really serious, and I think that's what really drove my passion. I not only wanted to start learning more for myself, but I wanted to encourage the girls around me to learn more and to understand more because of the experiences that I was going through. It wasn't until I moved to Dubai in my late 20s that I really started to realize that there was still very much a taboo around the topic of feminine health and feminine wellness. I grew up in the States where, we had access to education growing up and services, where here in the Middle East, it's something that's not really spoken about, and there's not a ton of accessibility, or there's a lot of barriers in terms of services or education. And it just made me realize that, wow, there's really an opportunity here to educate and to empower women with that knowledge. Looking back at my own journey, I often think about the fact that, what if I had the education, or what if I felt empowered enough to go visit a gynecologist earlier? Maybe I would have had the information or the knowledge to avoid my own situation. And it really makes me think of women like me who maybe don't feel like they can, or maybe don't have the education or the knowledge to really take their health into their own hands. At the end of the day, it isn't about sex. It really is about health. And taking matters into your own hands, taking your health into your own hands, and really protecting your feminine health the same way that you would with any other part of your body. You go to a dentist once or twice a year, you go see your doctor for a physical. It's the same thought and the same idea as going to see a gynecologist. Since we've launched the brand, we have received so many of your messages, just sharing your stories and your experiences. It's brought me to tears most of the time. And after sharing my story and seeing the response, it's really made me realize just how badly women want this information, and just how important it is to have conversations like these. I'd love to take a moment to share some of those stories with you, anonymously, of course, because they really touched my heart. At the age of 6 and 9, I was sexually abused. The traumas of those moments have followed me for years, and I haven't been able to talk about it without crying. I'm slowly realizing my body is precious, and I should never have allowed so much hate to stir up in my body. Brands like KETISH will let all of us remember how precious we are. I'm so happy a brand like this exists. I was 19 and struggled from irregular bleeding. My GP told me that it was because I was a stressed student. My mom had never been around to help as she was working away. Long story short, I was rushed in for an emergency, a radical hysterectomy at the age of 19, and now I have cancer and can never carry my own kids. I just wanted to say a short but enormous high five to what you're doing with KETISH. I'm recovering from anal cancer from the HPV virus, so I know your story all too well. I had no idea I even carried such a virus in my body, as I've never had an abnormal cervical pap. We absolutely need more discussion on women's health everywhere. Who knew so many women had issues in this area unless it's brought up? I could not stop crying when I read about KETISH. I'm 35 years old, through so much growing up as an Arab Canadian studying abroad, as it was all taboo. I had to have an abortion, as I'm married now with 2 kids. My boyfriend said I should reach out to you because of how strongly I felt about KETISH. I was so touched by your story and how familiar it was to mine. I was exposed at a young age to HPV, and as my mother and I didn't get along at all, I didn't have someone to talk to about my situation. I eventually had a colposcopy done and found 3 of the 7, at the time, of the dangerous cervical cancers. I went in alone as a 16-year-old to get my HPV vaccine, and now I am healthy with no detection. But I think about all the other women struggling to find the strength throughout their feminine health journey all the time. This is just a few of the hundreds of messages and stories that we've received. Over the next few months, we'll be bringing you a ton of content and education around all things feminine health. So stay tuned and please continue to share all of your questions and all of your stories. At the end of the day, this brand is for all of you ladies.